I believe that yesterday was the first time in the history of this podcast where we've been doing home run picks where we had a double dong where both the home run picks of the day wound up going yard twice. Nolan Gorman and Shohei Ohtani both going deep twice last night, and does put some pressure on today. But the good thing is we can kind of run it back with a lot of the same guys because Shohei Ohtani is pitching tonight. Nolan Gorman's Cardinals in a good spot for stacking. So we can kind of just get the band back together and try to replicate that matchup, that magic from last night. So let's see if we can do it one more time here tonight in MLB DFS. Welcome on into the solo shot. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberfire.com. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberfire.com, here to break down Wednesday night's 9-game main slate with lock set for 7:05 p.m. Eastern for today. There is one rain note for tonight. That is in Baltimore for the Nationals and the Orioles. How much it impacts the game depends on when the rain gets there. Something to check back on later for sure. I'm a bit worried because I do want to be getting some batters in this game, but we'll see how things shake out there because might not have that choice. Also, it is 95 degrees in Atlanta for the Giants and the Braves. So I downgrade pitchers there, and I'm saying pitchers intentionally because there are two guys there in Carlos Rodon and Charlie Morton who are pretty good. Would downgrade them, might still have to target one of those guys out of necessity. We'll talk about that in just a second. But first, a quick reminder to make sure you are subscribed to the Number Fire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed because our PGA DFS podcast for the Travelers Championship is already posted, getting you set for some PGA DFS this weekend at TPC. Out at the Travelers Championship, and that is with myself and Brandon Gadula breaking down this week's field. Pretty top heavy, but a lot of fun names in the field. We're breaking that down over on the Number Fire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. So check that out wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, leave us a rating and review as well. As always, a reminder, sports fans, there is no better time than today to sign up for FanDuel Fantasy for users who have yet to make a deposit on FanDuel Fantasy. You can deposit today to receive 2 free entries. All you have to do is deposit a minimum of $10 into your FanDuel DFS account, and you will be instantly rewarded with 2 free vouchers. This is a limited time offer, so be sure to deposit now and play for free. Head to FanDuel.com or download the FanDuel Fantasy app today. Eligibility restrictions apply. Go to FanDuel.com or download the FanDuel app for more details. Pitching preview for this Wednesday main slate. Carlos Rodon, as mentioned, is the highest salary pitcher on FanDuel, checking in at $10,500. Shohei Ohtani is $10,000 flat. Sonny Gray still ramping back up off the IL, 97. Tarek Skubal facing the Red Sox, 96. Charlie Morton in that weather game, 92. Jordan Montgomery against the Rays, 91. We have George Kirby, Tristan McKenzie, Paul Blackburn, and Eric Lauer as the others at $8,000 or higher. It feels like a lot of times this year, Shohei Ohtani has been on absolutely loaded slates. He's always going up against stiff competition on the same slate. That's not as true for tonight. And it opens the door for him to be the clear top option and to carry over the good vibes from last night into today's slate as well. Ohtani is facing the Royals, which is not a great matchup. It's not bad, not great. But just the reason it's not great is it's a 20% strikeout rate for them versus righties this year. But they're also just not super threatening. 94 WRC plus, which gives Ohtani a solid floor. Then he provides the ceiling himself. There has been lots of inconsistency with Ohtani as a pitcher, but the overall body of work is still very, very nice. He has a 2.84 skill interactive ERA, a 31% strikeout rate. Batted ball data is decent at least. So, and he's also not walking a lot of guys. Even with the Royals' low strikeout rates, I do have Ohtani projected for 7.2 strikeouts tonight. That is the most on the slate by 0.68 strikeouts, which is a pretty substantial gap. Ohtani is at home. He's in a non-threatening matchup. I see no reason not to be high on him here. So Ohtani, not dealing with as much competition for tonight, is the clear SP1 for tonight's slate, and I would treat him as such both for cash games and for tournaments. The second slot tonight is a lot more wide open after Ohtani. The other guys available are either in tough spots or on tight pitch counts. The one guy who doesn't have either of those restrictions is George Kirby. And I'm going to put him second behind Ohtani for tonight. He's facing the A's in Oakland. It is cooler there than it was last night, where we saw some home runs in the Mariners. 70-degree temperatures, 15 degrees cooler than it was last night. Closer to what it usually is in Oakland. Obviously, it's a good matchup, too. The A's have a 79 WRC plus against righties in their current active roster. They don't walk a whole lot. They have minimal power. Not that walks are a concern for Kirby to begin with, because he has a 3% walk rate across his past 5 starts. That's a sample where he has been leaning more on his curveball, and he threw it a season high 26% of the time in his most recent start. It's not a big whiff pitch for Kirby, but it does generate ground balls, and that's a good thing for him because he had been struggling with hard contact before this stretch. That's less of an issue now. He's let up a 36% hard hit rate across his past 5 starts, and that stretch is actually a stretch that started with the game against the A's, where he had 9 strikeouts in that game, 8 the game after that, and that second game was on the road, similar to tonight. They have not seen him since then, so I'm not too worried about familiarity here. So it's not the world's best slate for pitching. I'm fine taking a shot on George Kirby here and ranking him number 2 behind Shohei Ohtani and feeling pretty good about that, with Kirby being valued here at $8,800. The third slot's pretty tough. The board is open because Kirby is a value at $8,800, but I'm not big into most of the other studs. I think Tarek Skubal's a consideration against the Red Sox, but very difficult spot there. I'm going to rank Charlie Morton next, but I just know I think it's worth noting that doing so makes me very, very nervous, and the conviction level here is pretty low. It's the reason that I'm concerned is the park primarily. Again, it's super hot in Atlanta for today, which is great for offense, and we saw the effects of that last night. So there is no safety here, but there is upside. Morton has been upping his strikeout juice recently. He has had 8, 12, and 9 strikeouts his past 3 starts. Granted, all 3 of those were very good matchups, but not everybody can get to, 8 strikeouts, even in good spots. And Morton can. He's shown that recently. I haven't seen any big changes in his approach, so I'm still counting the early season numbers where he wasn't getting as many strikeouts, but you loop those in, his strikeout rate is 25%. Importantly, for tonight, it's 28% against lefties, because he'll see a lot of those here. The Giants are not an ideal target for a righty, and we saw that with Spencer Strider last night, who I liked a lot, and they punched him around. They've got a 21% strikeout rate against righties. They draw a lot of walks. I just don't have a lot of other options for tonight. I have Rodon projected for 6 strikeouts for tonight. I've got Tarek Skubal around 6, and that's where Morton is too. So Morton, for me, actually ranks 4th in terms of strikeouts behind Ohtani, Kirby, and then Tarek Skubal, but Skubal gets the Red Sox on the road. I'd rather go Morton there. So overall, pretty shaky landscape other than Ohtani and Kirby for me. I would not be shocked if I skew more towards single entry for tonight and just stick to those 2 guys. Shift my contest type preferences. I prefer single entry in general, but I think it's more of a single entry type night, building around those 2 pitchers, identifying stacks you like, and having a tighter core than you may usually have. Speaking of stacks, let's go there now. We talked about Ohtani as a pitcher earlier on, so let's go back and again, run it back with our what worked for us last night. Yesterday, I said that I was okay stacking the Cardinals against a righty, but would rather stack them against a lefty. And we saw them do well last night, but I think they're in an even better spot here. I think they need to be the number 1 stack for tonight. The Cardinals are facing Eric Lauer, who got off to an amazing start this year. But his old issues were lurking there the entire time. And the big thing was the hard contact. That was the big issue that was lurking. In the first 7 starts this year, the ERA for Lauer was 2.16. Very good number. But he's letting up a 42% hard hit rate with a 46% fly ball rate. Those are super dangerous numbers. It just didn't matter a whole lot because of how many strikeouts he was getting. But toward the end of that stretch, Lauer let up 3 home runs in the start against the Marlins. And I'm guessing it was his cutter that got hammered there because his next start out, he cut back on the usage on the pitch a lot. And it was getting whacked, so I get it, but cutting back on the cutter hasn't helped. His strikeout rate in that time with fewer cutters is 16%. He has a 5.09 skill interactive ERA. The batted ball data has not gotten better either. And that's even while facing some pretty bad teams. He faced the Nationals twice and the Reds once in that time. We've seen Lauer let up 3 home runs in consecutive games. He let up 8 earned runs in one of those games. So he's struggling right now. It's possible that Lauer gets things back on track if he can get more strikeouts again, but I wouldn't count on it here because the Cardinals obliterate lefties, a 133 WRC plus, a 44% fly ball rate, an 18% strikeout rate. To me, even with Lauer having some good skills and some good strikeout juice, I think the Cardinals are the top stack of the night. Within this Cardinal stack, Dylan Carlson is a switch hitter, but I think we need to view him in a much more positive light against lefties. Since the start of last year, Carlson has a 200 ISO against lefties versus 156 against righties. Strikes out a bit less against lefties too. I'm fine with Carlson against righties, but I think he's a better option against lefties. We'll see if Paul Goldschmidt can play here. Sounds like he had a back issue that kept him out last night. Obviously, if Goldschmidt can't go, you downgrade the stack a bit. But between Carlson, Arenado, Juan Yepes, other guys like that, I think that there's still enough here to feel good about this Cardinal stack, whether Goldschmidt plays or not. Just feel a bit less good about it if he doesn't go. The Orioles could be playing in bad weather, so check back on them later. But if they're able to play, I would be high on them for stacking for tonight. They're facing Patrick Corbin, who just keeps on struggling. That's even with his velocity being up. We've seen Corbin throwing harder in his past 7 starts than he was earlier on this year. And we've seen Corbin's velocity fluctuate in the past. And at times when it's gone down, he's lagged. And when it's gone up, he's improved. But that hasn't been the case this year with the velo going up. In those 7 games with more zip, he has a 7.05 ERA. That's even with only 2 of the 9 runs that scored against him last week being counted as earned. If you count 7 of those as being unearned, which they were, his ERA is still 7.05. He has a 4.38 skill interactive ERA with a 15% strikeout rate, letting up a ton of hard contact. And we've seen him let up multiple home runs in 4 out of 7 games during this stretch. The Orioles are not a juggernaut of an offense, but they're not awful. They got a 99 WRC plus against lefties, a 41% fly ball rate. That can work in the right matchups, and I think this is one of those. So check back on the timing of that weather. I think they should start this game. I just question if they'll play the full thing. So check back on the weather, make sure they're going to play, make sure they'll play most of that game. If they do, I would say to get in on the Orioles in this spot. We do want to be highest in the righties here, but I would still use Cedric Mullins. He has a 44% fly ball rate against lefties this year with a 25% strikeout rate. And he also does have 4 steals, so he will run even with a lefty on the mound. I'd prefer Mullins against a righty, but he's a super high upside guy. We could see reduced roster rates with it being lefty on lefty, and Mullins good enough to have upside even when he's facing a lefty. So Mullins to me is a guy you don't gloss over even when the Orioles are facing a lefty, and we are prioritizing the righties. Our third stack is a riskier one. That's the Twins against Tristan McKenzie, and it's risky because McKenzie's a good pitcher, but it's viable because he lets up a lot of home runs. And I think to me that balance pushes us towards the Twins here. The most relevant sample on McKenzie is his past 8 starts. He's been throwing more sliders in that time, and it is the typical trade-off with sliders where he gets a lot of whiffs, but lets up a lot of hard contact. Opponents have a .517 slugging percentage against that pitch, according to Baseball Savant, but his whiff rate is 32%. So I get it. I understand going more sliders, but there is some risk involved. In this time, McKenzie has a 4.37 skill interactive ERA. His strikeout rate is 22%. And he's had good results with a 2.72 ERA, but a lot of that is thanks to plus matchups. He's faced Colorado, Oakland, Baltimore, and Detroit in his past 4 starts. He faced Oakland in the first start of this run, too. If we look at Colorado, Oakland, Detroit, those are all bottom 4 teams in the league in WRC plus against righties. Baltimore's 19th, whereas the Twins, who will face tonight, are 3rd. They did face McKenzie back on May 15th, and he did last 7 innings there, but Twins hit a couple of home runs off him. They're now healthier than they were back on May 15th. We've seen McKenzie let up multiple home runs, the Tigers, the Orioles, and the A's recently too. So it's very risky to stack against a guy with this kind of profile who is actually like a good real-world pitcher, but I'm still willing to do it here in order to get that dinger upside. But it's just for tourneys, so the Twins will be on my list, assuming we're talking just for tournaments for tonight. When we're stacking the Twins, we can be pretty even between righties and lefties. McKenzie almost dead even splits against both. I do like Trevor Larnach a lot at $2,200. He has a 215 ISO this year against righties. Good batted ball numbers. Alex Kirilloff is also a lefty. He was smoking the ball down in AAA, kind of forced his way back up into the majors. He's had a lot of hard contact in 3 starts as he came back up too. So Kirilloff, Larnach, use them to get up to the Buxtons, the Correas, guys like that within this Twin stack. But overall, the Twins, I think, a risky but good option for this slate. Things to watch here. Yesterday, I said I would be on O'Neal Cruz as a one-off, and I'm there again today. He's facing Keegan Thompson, who had a great start against Atlanta last time out, but the longer sample says we can use guys against him, especially when they're fun guys who still have a salary of $2,700. It was up. It was minimum last night, but that's still fine. So O'Neal Cruz on the menu once again for tonight. If you want the O'Neal Cruz special tonight, the minimum salary guy who's in play for one-offs, I'd check out the Angels. They're facing Daniel Lynch, and I'm not sure if I really want to stack here because we can't use Ohtani in stacks. Jared Walsh kind of gets scrubbed out. Brandon Marsh against the lefty. That's tough. But Lynch lets up a lot of hard contact, a lot of fly balls. So Mike Trout's awesome. I like Max Stassi and Taylor Ward. And the O'Neal Cruz play of the night is David McKinnon, hitting for a ton of power in AAA before he got promoted. Could bat in the middle of the order given how power deprived these guys are against lefties. I think that if you want a minimum salary guy who can move the needle a lot, I would say McKinnon is there, but also Larnach and Kirilloff, pretty low salaried as well. Finally, if you want one more full stack in case the Orioles do get scrubbed out, I would check out the Cubs. They're facing Jared Eichhoff, who wasn't having the best year in AAA. It seems like he's coming up out of necessity for the most part. The Cubs, not an elite offense, so I don't want to go here, but I will at times, just because the Orioles rain game may force me to do so. The Twins are not a safe stack, so I do want to diversify and not be fully in on them, but the Cubs would be the next stack on my list. Okay, let's get to the dinger calls for today. And again, a lot of pressure here to try to duplicate the double dong from last night. The boring one, I will go Nolan Arenado. If Goldschmidt were to play and I knew he were fully healthy, I'd go Goldie over Arenado, but Arenado, like a 57 or so % fly ball rate against lefties so far this year. So, big bummer. We have to settle for Nolan Arenado here. The fun one, I will go Larnach. It was between him and Kirilloff, but Larnach has more of the homer-friendly profile. Kirilloff is, I think, the better hitter, but Larnach has the homer-friendly profile. So I will go Nolan Arenado and Trevor Larnach as our home run calls for tonight. That is all that we have here for today on the Solo Shot. Overall, pretty fun slate. I do think it, again, like I said, lends itself more so for single entry than multi-entry, just because there aren't a ton of plays I like, but the ones I do like, I like a lot. I think that makes it a fun option for today. Once again, do not forget to subscribe to the Number Fire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. We, of course, are on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts. You name it, you can find us there. And while you're there, like what you hear, leave us a rating and review as well. If you've got questions for me, I am on Twitter at Jim Sannes, JIMSANNES. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcast. Big thank you to everyone for tuning in for today. Good luck to you with your MLB DFS lineups for tonight. Let's see if Nolan Arenado and Trevor Larnach can let us have some fun once again tonight. This has been the Solo Shot right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.